All right, so my name is Jason Willwerscheid. I'm assistant professor in the math and CS department at Providence College in Rhode Island. I added a link to my GitHub repository, so I've got all my code for this analysis on that repository. So I welcome you to browse that if you have a chance. Okay. So what is so special about the two-strike setting? How is this volume back there? Is it good and back? Okay. So what's so special about the two-strike setting? On two strikes, whiffs are worse, you strike out. Fouls are merely neutral, basically a do-over, and drawing a walk is less likely. So making contact becomes much more valuable. And for this reason, it's widely believed that hitters, as Ted Williams wrote, shorten up and quicken up. So in other words, hitters are sacrificing power in order to increase contact. However, it's been very difficult to prove that this trade-off exists using public data, at least until bat tracking metrics became available last season. Okay, so just going to give an overall plan for the talk here. So in the first part of the talk, I want to prove that this contact power trade-off exists. And not only does it exist, but it is very general across hitters. So I'll show that most hitters' mean bat speed decreases by between 0.5 mile an hour and 2.5 miles an hour. And I'll show that a decrease in bat speed is linearly associated with an increase in contact rates. In the second part of the talk, then, I'll look at the yield of this contact power trade-off. Okay, so the first bullet point is really important here. So I'm not interested here in looking at swing decisions. That's been done, and it's been done very well by papers like Yi and Deshpande and Mold and Anderson and some others. And instead, I'm going to focus on swing adjustments. So rather than looking at whether hitters swing, I'm looking at how hitters swing. And the way I'm going to do that is to model expected differences in WOBA outcomes for two-strike swings versus non-two-strike swings. And what I'll show is that most hitters' two-strike adjustments improve expected WOBA outcomes by up to 30 points. Okay, so I'm not going to go through the details of every model I fit here. I wanted to give some details here just to give you the flavor of the approach. So to build the contact rate model, I'm fitting a generalized additive model, or GAM, to model contact rates for each hitter. So here are 433 separate models. So what you see here is the R syntax that I'm using. Just break that down a little bit. So on the left-hand side of the tilde is my response variable. So that's a binary response variable. Is the hitter making contact or not? And then on the right-hand side of the tilde are the predictors. So I'm using a two-dimensional smooth term to control for pitch location. And what the k equals 4 does is basically to handle kind of overfitting issues if the basis dimension is too large. So I'm using a very small basis dimension that basically gives you a unimodal probability surface. In addition, I'm estimating two fixed effects. So one for what I call pitch category, which is basically a binned pitch type. So fastball, off-speed pitch, or breaking pitch. And then the second fixed effect is whether the count is at 2 strikes. And this is the one I'm primarily interested in, because this is going to tell us essentially holding location constant, holding the pitch type constant, how much do hitters' contact rates change on 2-strike counts. So these are what those results look like. Okay, so I'm showing on the left-hand side coefficients, on the right-hand side p-values for the 433 hitters with at least 200 swings over the 2024 MLB season. So the units you see on the left-hand side are log odds changes in contact rates on 2 strikes. And on the right-hand side, I'm showing p-values. And you immediately see that there's a lot of quote-unquote significant p-values here. But to kind of quantify what's happening overall, I use John Story's Q value method. So I'll just kind of briefly explain the idea here. So this method starts with the observation that under the null assumption, the distribution of p-values should be uniform by definition, essentially. And then he observes that we can use this fact to disentangle null and non-null distributions. So basically the assumption is that everything on the right-hand side of this plot, large p-values, should be coming from the null distribution rather than the non-null distribution. So I've drawn a dashed red line there to indicate kind of the estimated null distribution there. So everything below that dashed red line is is our estimated null distribution, so that everything above that dashed red line is what we expect our non-null distribution to look like. So using this method, we can estimate the proportion of true nulls in our data set. So this would be hitters with, I should say hitters with no detectable change in contact rates. We estimate this proportion to be 12.4%. So the statistical power of this method is very good. Okay, so let's try to do the same things with power. It turns out that this is a lot more difficult to model changes in power. So exit velocity turns out to be insufficient, and this for at least two reasons. So first, it's only available for swings that result in contact, so you have a somewhat smaller sample size. And then secondly, it doesn't directly measure a hitter's power output in the sense that it's confounded with quality of contact. Okay, raw bat speed is much better, but it still lacks statistical power. And in particular, swings with very low bat speeds add a lot of noise. Okay, so let's see what happens when we try to fit those models. So this is the model that uses exit velocity as the response variable. The model is pretty similar, so I'm controlling for location and pitch category. And you see a pretty uniform distribution of p-values, which is, as I mentioned, what you expect to see under the null assumption. So if we use Story's Q-value method here, we estimate the proportion of true nulls to be 81.3%. So we've got very low statistical power here. Okay, this is what happens when you use bat speed instead as the response. So we do much better here. So we see a lot of, again, I put it in quotes, significant p-values for the two strikes coefficient. And our estimated proportion of true nulls drops from 81.3% to 33.7%. So it's a lot better. But we can do even better by filtering out low bat speeds. Okay, so I put filtering out in quotes here because I'm not using an arbitrary threshold to decide what's a low bat speed or not. Instead, I'm using a mixture model to tease apart partial and full swings. So I'm gonna skip the next slide, which is more details than I think we need, and just show you what this looks like. Are you getting weird lines here? Yeah, there's some weird artifacts showing up in these plots. Hopefully that's not too bad. So this is a histogram of Giancarlo Stanton's 2024 swings. So what I'm doing is I'm fitting a mixture of two components here. And I interpret the left component here, that kind of broad blue component, as weak or partial swings, whereas the right component in red here, I'm interpreting as the full swings. And if you look at these weak swings, some of these are bunts, swinging bunts, things like that. So what a mixture model does then is to give a probabilistic assignment to each swing. So based on the bat speed, what do we think? What's our degree of certainty that it's a full swing? Okay, and I use Giancarlo Stanton as an example, of course, because he swings very, very hard. So you see here, the threshold is estimated to be about 65 miles an hour. And you can also see from this plot that it seems like this mixture model is doing a pretty good job. If we were to manually threshold Stanton swings, we'd probably put it right around 65 miles an hour there. But 65 turns out to be like above the median bat speed for a lot of hitters. So there's not a real one size fits all threshold that you can use to decide between kind of partial and full swings. Okay, so what does this achieve? So what I do then is to weight swings in this model according to the probability that they're full. Okay, so I'm weighting the contribution to the overall likelihood according to the probability that it's a full swing. So this improves the statistical power of the model pretty massively. The estimated proportion of true nulls drops again from 33.7% to 11.4%, which is right around where the statistical power of the contact rate model was. So that looks pretty good. All right, so I'm just kind of showing a summary slide here. So I'm plotting the relationship between estimated changes in bat speed and estimated changes in contact rate. Each observation here corresponds to one of those 433 hitters, and then I'm color coding it according to whether or not they're significant, whether the changes in bat speed and changes in contact rate are decided to be significant. So you see, like for the vast majority of hitters here, for all but a handful of hitters, we're seeing detectable changes either in bat speed or in contact rate. And what we also see, and this is illustrated with the black dashed line there, is that there's a pretty clear linear trend happening here. So on average, a 1 mile an hour decrease in bat speed is associated with a log odds increase in contact rate of approximately 1/8. Okay, so the question I want to ask next is, what's the payoff? What's the yield of hitters' two-strike adjustments? And I'm going to measure this yield in WOBA for two main reasons. Firstly, because WOBA doesn't depend on context out of hitters' control. So it doesn't depend on runners on base, doesn't depend on outs, and so on. And secondly, because WOBA is the main rate statistic in wins above replacement, which is increasingly used in important things like salary negotiations and award decisions, it's not unreasonable to assume that hitters are, in fact, motivated to maximize their WOBA outcomes pretty directly. Okay, so more precisely, the question that I'm asking is, how much worse would hitters' WOBA be if they were to use their usual non-two-strike swings in two-strike counts? Okay, so I'm going to give this is kind of an overview of what I'm doing. Again, I'm not going to give the details of every model. So here I'll give the overview of the approach. So for each hitter, I'm going to model two-strike and non-two-strike swings. So I'm going to model differences in contact rates and bat speed. And these models are going to be different than what I showed in part one, more nuanced. And then for each pitch actually swung at on two strikes, I'm going to compare the expected WOBA result under the two-strike swing model to the expected result under the non-two-strike swing model. Okay, so increasing contact, decreasing bat speed, how does that change the expected WOBA result? I'm going to average over all of the pitches actually swung at two strikes, and I'm going to interpret this average differential as the share of WOBA that can be attributed to two-strike swing adjustments for plate appearances ending in a two-strike swing. Okay, so I'm really conditioning on a plate appearance ending in a two-strike swing. And that might seem like kind of a big restriction here, but in fact, nearly half of plate appearances do end in a two-strike swing. Okay, so in 2024, plate appearances ending in a two-strike swing comprised approximately 43% of all plate appearances. So that's a lot of plate appearances that we're covering here. Okay, so I build these models in two stages. So first, I'm going to model the discrete outcome of each swing. So what's the probability of a swinging strike? What's the probability of a foul ball? What's the probability of a ball hit into play? I'm going to do this using a hierarchical approach. So first, I model contact rate. Does the hitter make contact? Then conditional on contact, I model foul rate. So does this ball foul or hit into play? In the second stage, then I'm going to translate each outcome into an expected WOBA value. So the first two are super easy. Swinging strike results in a strikeout on two strikes, so that has a WOBA value of 0. A foul ball essentially results in a redo, and I'll show you how we account for that in a moment. Balls hit into play is the hard part. So for balls hit into play, I'm going to model the expected WOBA outcome as a function of bat speed and pitch location. So here's where bat speed comes in. Okay, so instead of going through all the details, I thought it might be nicer to just kind of show an example of what these models look like. So the example that I wanted to go with was Jordan Alvarez. That's the fitted models I'll be showing you on each of these slides. I think he's a pretty interesting case, which I'll try to explain here. So the main difference here is that I'm no longer estimating this two-strike effect as a fixed effect. Okay, so in other words, I'm not saying, does Jordan Alvarez uniformly increases his contact rates on two strikes or not? Instead, I'm estimating separate probability surfaces for non-two-strike swings and two-strike swings. So what this allows you to see are these kind of local trade-offs in contact rate. So you can see in particular that, so he's a left-handed batter, which means he's going to be standing on the right-hand side of these plots. So he's got kind of below average contact rates, high and outside on counts less than two strikes. Whereas his sweet spot seems to be kind of middle in and middle down. So on two strikes, what happens is he seems to sacrifice some of that contact in the sweet spot area, so middle in, middle down, in order to really increase the contact high and outside. And what ends up happening is he's got this pretty uniform distribution of contact rates across the entire strike zone. So I think that's pretty remarkable to make that adjustment. Okay, foul rates I do a little bit differently. So I found that foul rates don't seem to vary significantly across counts. If you're controlling for location and pitch category, they do vary quite a bit by pitch category. So instead I'm estimating a separate probability surface for each pitch category here. And looking at this, it seems like I might have been able to combine breaking balls and off-speed pitches. So that's one thing I might want to return to. But fastballs do seem to be quite different in terms of foul rates. Okay, so the bat speed model is pretty similar to the contact rate model in that here I'm estimating separate probability surfaces for non-two-strike and two-strike swings. And this again allows us to see some of these local trade-offs that are happening. Okay, so these are a little bit easier to see if instead of showing you these side-by-side plots, I show you the difference between these two surfaces. Okay, so what this is showing you is how much does bat speed change on two strikes. So what's really interesting about this to me is that he seems to lose a ton of bat speed, middle down where that sweet spot is. Okay, so he's losing both contact and bat speed in the same area. On the contrary, where he doesn't gain bat speed, but at least he doesn't lose any bat speed, is that high and outside quadrant. Okay, so he's both massively increasing contact rates without losing much bat speed in that region. Okay, so it's not really this trade-off. I increase my contact rate at the same time I decrease my power, but we've got kind of local trade-offs that are going on. I'll sacrifice both here in order to gain a lot of contact in the other area. Okay, the next step then is to translate bat speed to WOBA. I do this using league data, using data from the league as a whole because WOBA outcomes are extremely noisy. So what this is showing is the mean WOBA as a function of bat speed for pitches in the center of the strike zone. So that's why these WOBA values are so high. These are pitches middle. I am modeling, however, bat speed as an additive effect so that if we're looking at different locations, the shape of this curve doesn't actually change. Just the intercept would be the only thing that changes. Okay. I also added a rug plot showing the median bat speeds for the 433 hitters in this data set. I did that in order to kind of show the most important regions of this curve. Okay, so let's put everything together. So the expected WOBA value of a two-strike swing conditional on the swing ending in the plate appearance can be estimated as the probability of a ball in play times the expected WOBA value of a ball in play divided by the probability that that swing ends the plate appearance. So in other words, the probability of a ball in play plus the probability of a swinging strike. The foul would be the only thing that doesn't end the plate appearance. Okay, I've also given formulas for those in terms of the models that I showed you earlier. What I wanted to make really explicit here is this conditioning on the count. Okay, so this indicator variable 1 sub 2s, which just says whether or not the count is at two strikes. Okay, and I wanted to make that conditioning explicit because what I do next is to simply vary the value of that indicator variable. So I set it to 1 in order to get values, in order to get the expected WOBA value of a two-strike swing under the two-strike swing model. And then I set it equal to 0 to get the counterfactual expected WOBA value of a two-strike swing using the non-two-strike swing model. Okay, so that's how I'm trying to estimate the effects of two-strike swing adjustments. Okay, finally then, I take a weighted average of the pitches that a hitter actually swung at on two strikes. Okay, so on the left-hand side, numerator, on the right of the numerator, that's the formula that we saw on the previous slide. Okay, so we're indexing each swing, and that formula there, the fraction within the fraction, that gives you the expected WOBA value for that particular swing, conditional on the swing ending the plate appearance. And then I'm weighting each of those observations by the probability that it ends the plate appearance. Okay, so this gives me the hitter's expected WOBA outcome conditional on the plate appearance ending on a two-strike swing. And I'm performing this calculation separately using the two-strike swing model and the non-two-strike swing model. The difference then can be interpreted as the per plate appearance increase in WOBA attributable to two-strike swing adjustments. Okay, so here's the results, and this is kind of what I promised earlier. We see the majority of hitters improving their WOBA, their per plate appearance WOBA, by up to 30 points. Okay, so I used methods similar to Story's here to try to estimate the proportion of true nulls. That estimated proportion is around 35%. So the statistical power of this model could probably stand to be improved a little bit. I don't really buy, we saw that the vast majority of hitters are making some sort of adjustment. I don't buy that 2/3 of them are not getting any results due to these adjustments. So there's still some refinement to be done here, I think. But we're already detecting changes for 2/3 of hitters, so it's a good start. Okay, so everyone loves leaderboards, so I wanted to show a leaderboard here. I do want to caution, however, that the standard errors here are fairly large. So I bootstrapped standard errors for a number of hitters with a similar numbers of plate appearances, and I pretty consistently got standard errors of around 7 points. So the top of this leaderboard is separated from the bottom by only one standard error. Okay. And then I just wanted to conclude by showing some other examples from this leaderboard that I thought showed some kind of interesting adjustments being made. So first example, I've got two of these. First example is Cedon Rafaela. So what's remarkable to me about this is that this contact rate is really concentrated around just the bottom half of the zone on counts less than 2 strikes. So on 2 strikes, he's able to expand that contact region almost to the entire strike zone, with kind of an exception around the high and outside corner. Okay, so he is right-handed, I believe. However, in that high and outside corner, he doesn't lose any bat speed. Okay, so that's interesting. Okay, and then this is the other example I wanted to show you, Andres Jimenez. So here, what we've got going on is there's kind of two corners that have kind of lower contact rates on counts fewer than 2 strikes. So both high and outside, he's left-handed, so he's standing on the right-hand side of these plots. So the high and outside and low and inside are both kind of regions of lower contact rates. High and outside, we see a phenomenon similar to what we saw with Yordan Alvarez. Okay, so he really increases the contact rates there without seeming to lose very much bat speed. Okay, low and on the inside is a little different. He does manage to increase his contact rates, but you can see that he loses a ton of bat speed in that region. So it does seem like it's difficult to kind of make the kind of adjustment that would both increase contact rates without losing bat speed in 2 entirely disparate regions. Okay. Okay, I've got other examples I can show. I've got model details I can show. I wanted to stop there. Again, if you'd like to browse the code, I've got it in GitHub repository, Willwerscheid /SABR 2 strikes. And thank you for having me. Any questions? All right. Nice catch.
All right. Great talk. Love this.
Well, thank you.
I was wondering if you thought about controlling for either the quality of the pitcher that the batter was facing or the type of pitcher that the batter was facing, like whether or not they have a breaking ball, that they throw a lot, things like that.
Yeah,
that might also influence how they change their swings.
Yeah, that's a really good question. There's just not a ton of data yet. It's just 1 season worth of data. And if you're modeling it for each hitter, overfitting really does become an issue. So it's sort of like that's the most I dared to control for without, running into serious overfitting problems. But definitely good points to bring up. Definitely things worth looking into. Yeah.
Hey, yeah, nice talk, thanks. If ops or development person came to you and was like, should we put 2 strikes on the board for all of our hitters when we're, at bat because of the WOBA increase you can see, would like that be advisable? That's
Oh.
hypothetical.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. So like on 2 strikes, your WOBA outcomes go down, because you've got 2 strikes on the board. So it's not a situation you want to be in. So the question is, given that you're in this kind of undesirable situation, how can you adjust the swing in order to make the best of a bad situation, essentially? But yeah, WOBA, if you look at just the expected WOBA when you're at 2 strikes, it's much, much lower than on non-2 strike counts.
Yeah, so I was wondering, you know how reliable those results are for a batter, like year to year? Did you find like the same level of trade-off? I think Matt Wilson was like #1 on your leaderboard. Is that like, have you found it pretty reliable year to year?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we've got 1.5 years of data now. When I started this, we only had data for 2024. So we've got the second half of 2023 now. So it's something we could start to look into. It's something I'm definitely interested in looking into once we've got 2025 data as well. But we've only got 1 full season's worth of, at least publicly,
Right. No, the other comment I was gonna make too is I think like swing length would be interesting to see like if there's any swing length results, since that's available like fast speed. Like I think the same duration of time fast speed is, but yeah, great presentation.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So could you go back to the Jordan Alvarez bat speed?
You want to see that's a little easier to read.
Yeah, so the way that I might interpret it is that on the inside part of the plate, you see less of a difference in bat speed versus 2 strike versus earlier in the count because you have to have faster bat speed in order to hit that ball. And so the way without your context, and the conclusion I would have come to is this is a hitter with an extreme pull approach. And on 2 strikes, he's abandoning that pull approach to just try and put the ball in play.
Yeah.
Why is that maybe not the best interpretation of the data?
That's a good question. I'm not sure. That's something I would definitely be interested in talking to people who know more about like what hitters are thinking, what hitters are trying to do. It's been over 30 years since I've swung a bat. So I have no idea what they're trying to do. I'm just kind of looking at the data and trying to ask what can I do with this data? What does this data tell me? But yeah, that's an awesome question.
Thank you. And great analysis, by the way.
Okay, thanks.
Hey, yeah, thanks for the presentation. Yeah, I think in the past we had some like discussions on like the quality of foul balls. And I know this wasn't exactly yours, but maybe you can speculate or you looked into it on the side. But have you ever looked into like 2 strikes, foul ball and then hit, or even like 2 strikes, foul ball, walk would be a success, like some of those sequences?
No, I'm not accounting for sequencing at all. Yeah, no, that's an interesting question. So I found that foul rates didn't differ among counts once you control for location and pitch type. But I think you're asking about the quality of the foul balls, essentially.
Yeah, if you fouled off and then you still get on base, that would be success for the hitter, instead of like fouled off and then you still get out. It's not as productive.
Yeah, so the way the Statcast database defines a foul ball, if you've worked with this, it's like I think it's the description field, is that it's not a foul ball if it gets caught. It's only a foul ball if nothing happens. So I'm sort of hoping so if a foul ball is caught, I believe it gets counted as a ball in play in that database. If someone wants to tell me I'm wrong, I'll be happy to make those adjustments. But I'm sort of hoping that that's kind of handled just by the way that the every foul ball kind of has the same quality within this database, at least. Yeah, it would be super interesting to look into, though. Oh, okay. We're out of time. Sorry. Definitely happy to talk offline if anyone has any other questions. So thanks again.